What is going on, everybody? John Middlekauff here, 3 and Out podcast, joined by Colin Cowherd, rocking and rolling. Hopefully everyone's having a good night. Monday Night Football, the divisional round is set. But before we dive in, me and Colin, make sure you subscribe, like the Volumes YouTube page. Make sure you subscribe to the 3 and Out podcast. I want to tell you about my friends at Gametime. Gametime is the fastest growing ticket app. And because of Gametime, when you download the app, just go to your app store, type in the promo code JOHN, that's JOHN, get $20 off your first pair of tickets. I'm going to my first NHL game on Thursday night. Never been to a hockey game. But because of them, I'm going to attend. I can't recommend it enough. Hockey, college basketball, the NBA, if you live in one of these NFL cities, concerts, anything that's going on in your surrounding areas. You want to take your son, you want to take your daughter, you want to take your buddy, you want to take your wife. Download the Gametime app right now, fastest growing ticket app in America. Type in the promo code JOHN, JOHN, $20 off. Very easy to do. Can't recommend enough. Gametime, do it right now. Okay, Colin, we now have, 8 teams set. We have the divisional round set. We had Monday Night Football, 2 big brands. A lot of pressure on the Cowboys, and you got to give the coaching staff, and let's start, I guess, with Dak, who was, probably played one of his better games of his career.
Yeah, I thought that was as good a performance as Dak's ever had. My rule has always been a good quarterback has a lousy week. They'll bounce back. These are pro athletes. You don't become a pro. I mean, Dak's never been a pro athlete because he has a beautiful arm, because he's the twitchiest this or the most gifted that. He's a very driven, aspirational guy. He works really, really hard at his craft and doesn't need, a self-motivated guy. And when you play really bad for the Cowboys or any big profile team, you almost always bounce back. So I like Dallas tonight. I thought Dak would play really well. I thought he had a drive, may have been at the end. I'm looking at my notes here. He had 11 straight completions at one point. I thought he kind of gave his body up a couple of times tonight. Like it felt like Dak really understood.
It was big.
Yeah, like the opposite of Kirk Cousins, who I felt even yesterday, underneath throws. Dak was running out there, going head first, jumping into defenders. It was like Dak really understood what it meant for him, the team, the Cowboys, and I thought he was terrific. I really thought Dak was as good as I've seen him as a pro.
Yeah, I think sometimes him and Cousins get lumped in. They're kind of that second-tier guy. Statistics sometimes parallel each other. But when you saw tonight, they get Dak on the move. Cousins doesn't have that in the bag. I mean, one of the reasons Dak, he wasn't a great passer in college. It was athletic ability. And I think ever since the ankle injury, you get him on the move. I watched tonight thinking, that player is a problem for the 49ers if he's going to play at that level on the move. He's never going to be Peyton Manning and Tom Brady from the pocket. But if you can mix up the play action stuff, obviously the play action touchdown, he has other elements to his game that when you ask him to throw it 40 plus times from the pocket, that's when he gets in trouble.
Yeah, I think Dallas is an interesting matchup. They can put pressure on Purdy. The weakness of the Niners tends to be their O-line, especially the center right.
Yeah.
So I think you can move Micah around, DeMarcus Lawrence. I think they can create a little discomfort for the 49ers. Dallas tonight played virtually flawless. So let's expect Dallas to not play as well next week. I mean, they're a highly emotional team. Many of their best players, Trayvon Diggs, CeeDee Lamb, Micah Parsons, are very young players.
Yeah.
They tend to be emotional. So they're a little hot and cold. They'll probably pull back next week. I expect the Niners to win. But I will say this. I talked about this on my show today. Mike McCarthy took 100% of the PR beating in the divorce with Aaron Rodgers. Aaron, 3 straight years, losing at Lambeau, outplayed by an old Tom, Goff, and Garoppolo in the fourth quarter. Mike McCarthy with a nearly flawless game plan tonight. I'm not saying Mike McCarthy shouldn't shoulder some of the blame with Aaron Rodgers, but Matt LaFleur hasn't solved kind of the fourth quarter Aaron Rodgers, hasn't solved the playoff disappointment Aaron Rodgers. And here's McCarthy 4-1 with Cooper Rush, 65% winner with Dak Prescott. We got to give Mike McCarthy a little respect. Like, that was a hell of a performance tonight.
Well, I wrote it down. The Cowboys coaching staff was phenomenal. Offensively, obviously he's an offensive guy, him and Kellen Moore. Dan Quinn's been interviewing for head coaching jobs. The one thing that's interesting, right, this is the second year of the Monday night games. Well, last year the Rams won the Super Bowl playing in the Monday night game, but they played at home. So tonight, the 49ers played on Saturday day, the first game. So they get the extra day on Sunday, and then they really get all day today. And even Kyle mentioned,
yes,
I'm going to be at home watching this game. We're going to prep for both. And I bet by about early on in that game, he told his coaches, let's just focus on Dallas. But now Dallas has to fly home tonight. I'm not a math major here, but let's say 3-4 in the morning, they get back to Dallas. Obviously, the players get tomorrow off, but the coaches are spent. That they threw the kitchen sink tonight. It's a lot. It snowballs on you fast. Like you said, the players, there might not be flawless, but now you got to get the coaches locked and loaded back. That, to me, is a pretty big disadvantage when you're the road team on Monday night and you end up playing, a team that played on Saturday. That's a pretty big swing for rest.
Yeah, I think both the Giants and the Cowboys will come back down to earth against the Eagles and the Niners. I was laughing today about Daniel Jones. He had 3 games this year over 300 yards. 2 were against the Vikings. And I was talking to an NFL coach texting today, and he said he thought the Vikings' defensive coaching was abysmal. He said those schemes, they really, really, he echoed what Sean Payton said on my show today, which is they miss Mike Zimmer defensively, and they do. So Daniel Jones with a pass rush, the inability to run with Saquon is going to come back down to earth. And I think the Cowboys with a 2-day rest disadvantage probably come back down to earth. Dallas's defense has some really spectacular players. I still contend it's not consistently a great defense. So listen, this is what's fun about the playoffs. I think the AFC is fascinating because now Cincinnati's missing 3 offensive line starters. Buffalo is now mistake prone. So it's, I think the NFC, we see it as wide open. I think after this next weekend, it won't look nearly as wide open. Philadelphia and the Niners will look like far and away the best teams.
Yeah, to me, if the Niners stay healthy and Jalen is just 90+%, they feel like they're on a collision course. Before we dive into a couple other things, obviously Tom, I've been saying for a while he's a shell of himself, not from his inability to throw, right? Breeze couldn't throw, Ben couldn't throw, Payton couldn't throw at the end. Tom can still throw. I mean, hell, right until the end of that game, you can see the arm strength. He wants no part of being hit. I don't blame him. Yeah. He's 45 years old. I bet you go down ski slopes yesterday differently than you would have 30 years ago, right? There's a risk factor at his age. It makes no sense. But he can't play quarterback at a high level if he's not willing to stay in there because he's never been able to move. And that was always kind of a point of differentiation for him. He would stay in there and throw the dart at the last second. And now he just won't. And let's face it, no matter any of the teams that have options, that no team has the mid-90s Cowboys offensive line. So he's going to get hit. That's part of the sport right now because the offensive lines aren't that great. So what's he going to do?
Miami feels like the fit to me because that's a distribution offense with a lot of good weapons. But I was texting a friend tonight and I said, Tom needs to now cherry pick teams without holes offensively. He no longer elevates others, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like when he went to Tampa, get me Tristan Wirfs, get me Lenny, playoff Lenny, bring Gronk, get me AB. The reality with Tom, like Brock Purdy, cost nothing for 4 years. He's in his prime. Tom's not. He's more mobile. He's now he's gaining playoff experience. Like this idea that San Francisco is going to make a move on him. They got Trey Lance, Brock Purdy, and they're not paying either one of them anything. If you want to keep this defense, if you want to keep both those linebackers, if you want to keep all those D linemen, you got to save somewhere. And, I think to your point, Brady now no longer elevates. He needs protection. You can't have a bad right tackle with Tom. You can't look at their offense in the last 3 months. You have to have a run game. the Mahomes, Burrow, Allen, Herbert. I mean, if you go look at statistically, the Chargers don't do anything well. And they took a 27-0 lead in a playoff game on the road. So I think Miami looks like a good fit for Tom in terms of they kind of have offensively, they kind of have all the pieces, a lot of bubble screen guys, one over the top guy, tight end, that one. And it's the San Francisco system.
Yeah.
And San Francisco needs a quarterback that's upright and healthy 17, 18 weeks a year.
When you look at the quarterbacks right now that are having success, beside Brady, Cousins is the only guy probably in the top 12 who can't move. Every single guy can move. I mean, look at Purdy now. Obviously, Lawrence, Herbert, all the top guys, Burrow, Allen, Rodgers, Mahomes. I mean, all these guys. Kyler when healthy, Lamar when healthy. This is a movement. That position has just dramatically changed in 5 years overnight. I mean, all these guys. There is not. None of these guys are coming in the league like that either, right? All the college quarterbacks are all really athletic. You talked to Sean Payton today. Went viral. It was. I mean, that's about as candid of a coach ideal situation. Pretty cool. What was your big takeaway?
Sean's going to be very picky. I'm having dinner with him tomorrow. Sean's going to be very picky on jobs. I asked him a question on the air that I kind of knew the answer to, but I wanted him to say it. I said, owner and quarterback really is what matters to Sean. Stable owner, top quarterback. So you can start eliminating a lot of people over the next 3 to 4
Arizona,
days.
Adios.
Houston.
See ya.
So I mean, I think in my opinion,
Carolina, would they be
the Chargers? Well, the Chargers, if McVay would have left, that would have been interesting. The Chargers, Sean lives in Los Angeles and likes it a lot. But when I hear a lot of the reporting on where Sean would like to go, just ask yourself, owner, quarterback. He's not desperate. Sean's making a lot of money at Fox. Fox loves him. We're not moving off him. I mean, selfishly, I hope he stays with us one more year because I've had so much fun talking to him. He's good.
Looking at the Chargers pick, it's 21. Obviously, recording this, Brandon Staley's still employed. I mean, he was pretty candid today about it's going to take a first-round pick. I mean, he's obviously boys with Mickey Loomis. One, could you see that coming together if they fire Brandon Staley? Not only paying Sean Payton, which is something the Chargers never did, and I'd give a pick 21 for him all day long. I mean, that's the easy part. Will they pay him $20+ million a year?
Yeah. Jimmy Johnson, the Spanos family, they offered Jimmy Johnson the job, and it's kind of well documented. Jimmy didn't want to live out west. Jimmy,
like the Miami,
Spanos, and Jimmy's a Miami guy. They came and offered Jimmy the whole thing. The Spanos is, from what I've been told through the years, Jim Trotter mentioned this, and he's very accurate. Jim does a great job. He's very accurate. The Spanos they're not going to give power to one guy. They're,
Sons,
Dean
big part of it. Yeah.
Sons are in the front office. I know they're sons. They're nice guys. They're bright. Telesco. They want everybody. I mean, remember when Marty Schottenheimer wanted a son on his staff and AJ Smith, the GM, said no. And this is an organization where they don't want one person having all the power. And I do think Sean really works with Telesco. Sean is passionate and intense, and Telesco is very capable, very emotionally capable of dealing with a live, passionate coach. So I think Sean would be perfect. My guess is they stay with Brandon Staley. They went from 9 wins to 10 wins. I heard somebody 2 weeks ago that I trust, I asked about Staley, and I voiced my concerns on, I think he's smart. I don't think they do anything particularly great. Run the ball, get turnovers. They're not a great second half offense or defense. What's their identity? And, Staley, like a lot of young, smart coaches, can, I think, get a little stubborn. I've heard a tad stubborn on what he believes. Now, they did talk him out of some of these analytic decisions this year, but
he clearly rolled that back a little bit this season.
Yeah. I just worry that 2 years in, what are they? Dable, Mike McDaniel, Doug Peterson, Kevin O'Connell created an identity in 6 games. Brian Flores, who got fired in Miami, but 6 games in, you were like, wow, that defense and those special teams, we're 2 years in now. What do the Chargers do exceptionally well?
I just think in action, when you have a talent at quarterback, is every year you waste with that guy. And Herbert could have played a little bit better in that game, but you have the chance to be something special. I mean, you play with the Chiefs right now as is. Can you imagine if they got a real coach? I got a quote for you because I know you love the wiring of the quarterbacks. I saw Kittle talk to Peter King and on Purdy, and he said failure is a big part of learning to play quarterback in the NFL. And Brock had success and failure in college. So nothing is really unknown to him since he's got here. He understands. And you see some of these quarterbacks that get to the NFL and have a lot of success. Patrick Mahomes failed a lot in college. Josh Allen, up and down roller coaster in college. Joe Burrow had to leave a college, right? These guys aren't just going to Alabama or Ohio State and winning it all and just getting the job from the jump, go through ups and downs, because what he's doing obviously is unprecedented. But when you really dive in and look, beside his size, all Big 12 guy, first team twice, second teamer his sophomore year. So a lot of success. And it didn't all go perfect. Had a great year, and then a senior year, it didn't go as well. So mentally, you watch him talk, you go, God, this guy kind of feels like talks like a quarterback. Like it's not too big for him.
Well, the thing I really noticed, John, two things that jump out. And this is, first of all, tells you how good Kyle Shanahan is. Kittle, 5th round. Jennings, 6th round. Elijah Mitchell, 6th round. Purdy, 7th round. Name another offense in the league that has this many late round, like highly productive players. Kyle's brilliant. That's first thing. This system can take guys. Now, Kittle would have starred anywhere. I don't think the other guys would. The second thing is, Matt Campbell's a very good football coach at Iowa State. If Harbaugh left, he would be a finalist for Michigan. They were very good with Purdy. He left. They were awful this year. Now, timeout. So they were recruiting on the success with Purdy. The recruiting's gone up. Yeah. Campbell's a good coach. The Big 12 was not very good. And Iowa State was awful. Maybe Brock Purdy is Romo or Kurt Warner. He was just either under-scouted or overlooked. That, like, when I watch him, the one thing that jumps out to me, his quick decision-making is exceptional. Like, he dirted that ball yesterday when the play blew up, and he just dirted it. He's very good at, like, moving out of the pocket and reestablishing his feet and his shoulders. Like, he's just mechanically. When I read the scouting on him, and you're a former NFL scout, it was he was sloppy and erratic. I think some of it is Kyle's coached some of it out of him.
Yeah.
He looks really, his feet are good. His decision-making, he straightens himself out. He goes from sideways, quick to the feet. Some of this is Kyle. We got to give Kyle a lot of credit.
Yeah, I mean, and I think he has some natural instincts, and he's a much better athlete. His 10 time, the 10-yard split in the 40 is the same as Christian McCaffrey's. And Pete said after the game, he said, I didn't realize he was this mobile. I looked over there. I thought it was Fran Tarkington running around. I mean, they couldn't. I mean, they were chasing them all. Now, the Cowboys, Micah probably does catch him, so he's got to be. But he has a very good understanding of his speed relative to the guy chasing him. And that's something that you can only learn. Trey Lance, for an athlete, didn't play very fast. And in fairness to him, how would he? He played one season at a small school. Purdy's used to seeing NFL guys chase him.
That's a really good point. I'm going to write that down. That's a very good point. I heard the same thing about Trey Lance, that he's a power runner, more Cam than Lamar, and that Purdy is a little bit more twitchy than Trey is. Now, Trey's big, strong, power arm. He's actually kind of the opposite of Purdy, where Brock is accurate, twitchy, quick. Trey is
his football smarts. To have this offense down like he does is insane. Matt Ryan said it took him a year to figure it out. This guy's in his rookie season. It's pretty crazy to watch. Last but not least, the Dayball Daniel Jones, what he's done with this quarterback, to me, has a lot of similarities what Jim Harbaugh did in 2011 with Alex Smith. A high pick who's probably not as talented as the elite guys, but clearly has a lot going for him. Duke guy, Utah guy, smart, big, can move. What he's got going on with Daniel Jones, obviously Minnesota's defense sucks, but just throughout this season, he's worth his weight in gold to the Giants immediately just doing that.
I think the Alex Smith comp's really smart.
I think Daniel Jones has a little bit better arm too.
Well, if you watch what they did to him, so over the first, let's say until Thanksgiving, they pulled down the mistakes. They slightly elevated his completion percentage. This is what he did with Josh Allen. They eliminate the mistakes. They give him some easy layup throws, take some risk out of it with Daniel. Now, Daniel's not Josh Allen athletically, but what they did was, Daniel led the NFL like in quarterback fumbles the first couple of years.
He was turning the ball over nonstop. Yeah.
So they reduced that and then a little more accurate. And then after Thanksgiving, a few weeks after it, then they kind of let him loose. Okay, we're going to go from 24 to 28 to 30. They let him loose. And they did it against the Vikings, the first game. Obviously, Daboll looks at the film and says, this defense, I can let him loose. And they did it again. So this is what worries me about Daniel. His two best games of the year, arguably, were against the Vikings. He had a good game against the Lions, but Carolina ate him up. Dallas ate him up twice. Philadelphia ate him up once.
Destroyed him in the one game, yeah.
Washington ate him up once. I think Daniel's limited. I think we're going crazy right now. I think what you do, if you're the Giants, they got to get a tight end, a receiver, probably a corner. I don't think it's crazy. This sounds nuts. 5th, 6th round, draft another quarterback. I think, or you franchise tag him, John.
Yeah, just figure it out.
That's more than you want to pay him, but they don't have a ton of huge contracts, right? So Saquon, Dexter Lawrence, but they don't have a lot of big contracts. They're going to rebuild this offensive line. Both their tackles now, Evan Neal and Thomas, are cheap. They're going to draft receivers and tight ends. So this offense outside of Barkley is not very expensive.
But he's a free agent, and it's hard. What do you do with running backs? You don't like giving them long-term contracts, but damn, he's pretty good.
I think you have to keep him because of Daniel's limitations. I think you have to.
Okay, I got to hit on one more thing. You might have talked about it on your show today. I didn't see the Lamar Jackson situation, which has clearly gotten weird. And my thought's pretty simple. Money's all relative. So whether you make $50,000, you think you're worth 80, whether you make $1 million and you think you're worth 2, or whether you make 25 million, you think you're worth 200. Things get weird when their animosity with money comes up. And in sports, when injuries factor in, things got weird in Baltimore. And it does feel like enough reporting from people that are in the know that they might have crossed. I wouldn't be stunned if Lamar Jackson is on another team. And usually, you just ride out quarterbacks who are successful. But I had some people is it crazy? Maybe the Bears are open. They get, Justin Fields. They move on from Lamar.
Seattle.
The Bears kind of restart.
Seattle.
Yeah.
What about Seattle? They have a power run game. I think you have to. And
we know John will take some big swings with Pete. I mean, yeah, I kind of expect him to be on another team, to be honest with you, at this point.
There's a little Kawhi Leonard here, nonverbal, too much mystery,
family involved, no agent.
Yeah, there's just both Kawhi and Lamar thought they were sort of overlooked into college, overlooked out of college. Little chip on their shoulder. Yeah, I don't know if it was his call. I didn't like him not being in Cincinnati. But, what's really interesting, John, when you look at Baltimore playing Huntley in Cincinnati, almost pulled that thing off. That culture and that kind of power football, that's the kind where you could bring in a rookie quarterback if he had 2 or 3 years starting. I mean, Kenny Pickett at the end of the year,
I know
Pittsburgh felt like a playoff team. I think that culture in Baltimore, I really like what Lamar brings to the table, but I could see them starting over and just saying, listen, it's not working. By the way, what if they went and got Anthony Richardson from Florida, and they just said, listen, we're going to do what we did with Lamar. We're just going to get tight ends, running backs, linemen, and defense around him. I could see him doing it. Their culture is so formidable. You're not going to score much on that defense over the next 2 years.
They took two average Pac-12 quarterbacks in Huntley and Brown and competed in games. That's insane. Those guys couldn't play in the Pac-12. You're right.
Crazy.
So you see what they do with talent like Lamar. Okay, we got to do a little merch giveaway here on AMP. And if you're listening right now, here's what you do. I'm going to throw out a question, and you put the answer in the chat, and the first 3 people that get it correct will receive some free merch. So the question is this. In 1976, the place where you lived, not in 1976, but the Tampa Bay Buccaneers started. Who was their first starting quarterback in 1976? Once you hear the name, famous guy.
I know. I remember I have an odd Rain Man memory of the 76 Bucks and the 76-77 Seattle Seahawks. I can give you.
Were those the 2
players.
Did they both start in the same year, 1976?
Yeah, I think it was 76 because the Mariners came in 77. So Seattle got 2 teams really quickly. And I remember I can go to that Seahawk lineup: Jim Zorn, Steve Largent. God, they had some crazy players. They had Steve Rabel was a receiver who became a very popular newscaster. Now he's the voice of the Seahawks. Dave Brown was the corner.
Feels like Seattle got more competitive quicker than Tampa.
Seattle was better offensively. Tampa was great defensively. So Seattle was just lost shootouts. What was interesting about that Seattle team, God, I'm just thinking of so many of those players. They strangely gave the Raiders fits for years. And I mean the Stabler, like these were Raider teams that were winning. Lester Hayes.
Wouldn't the Raiders play man-to-man defense so you could throw on them, right? If you get open.
Yeah, so the Seahawks had excellent receivers, Sherman Smith, Jim Zorn. So they had a left-handed quarterback who moved. Sherman Smith was a tank at running back. He was like 240, 2 very good receivers, and they scored on people. Their defense was like the Vikings. The Bucs had like the Selmans. They had really good defensive players, could not move the rock for about 3 years. So if you had combined the two, you had a hell of a football team.
And think about the Bucs even through the 80s and the 90s. Offense was always their problem. But they were terrible on offense really till John Gruden got there, and even then they weren't that great, were they?
Yep. No, I mean, Pete Carroll, Jack Patera was the Seahawks coach, and they were a great watch. Those 70, they were on TV all the time. Efren Herrera, the kicker, Thunderfoot Weaver, the punter. I forget how many of these guys came 2 or 3 years in. I just remember them having an anemic secondary and eventually going after Kenny Easley. You could throw the ball in Seattle all day long. But the teams were popular. The players were beloved in the city. Jim Zorn was this good-looking left-handed quarterback running around. People loved him.
Yeah. Okay, we got some winners. I'm getting them text to me right now. 1976, the first starting quarterback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who went on to have a long and lucrative coaching career. At Hasbullah, at Raider Nation 17, and at Tucker 49ers, all got it correct. His name, the old ball coach, Steve Spurrier, who was drafted by who, Colin?
Steve Spurrier.
Spent a long career playing for this team.
Now, and I'm trying to think. I'm going to go backwards on Spurrier. He coached Washington. He coached South Carolina. He coached Florida. He coached Duke. He played for Tampa. Didn't he play USFL a little bit? Did he play USFL at all?
I don't know. But this team drafted him, and he played there for a long time. The San Francisco 49ers. They were pretty bad. Long-time 49er player. So at Hezbollah, at Raiders Nation 17, and at Tucker 49ers, You just go on the chat on AMP where you find the information. Congrats to you. Free merch. Steve Spurrier, Tampa Bay's. I can't imagine that season couldn't have gone very well for Steve, huh? That probably drove him into coaching.
The Niners have had so many fascinating quarterbacks. You go back to John Brody, Steve Young, Joe Montana, Colin Kaepernick, Alex Smith. Now they've got Brock Purdy, Jimmy Garoppolo. They've had some of the most unique quarterback stories. I mean, Kaepernick, for about a year, I thought he was going to revolutionize the game. Like 6'4". I remember playing the Packers in those playoff games, and you're like, is this the future of quarterback play?
Did you name Jeff Garcia from the Canadian Football League?
Garcia.
You know the crazy part about the 49ers, though? In all their great teams, basically since 1981, they have always, on their great teams with, historic offenses, been awesome on defense. Throughout the 80s, when George Seifert was a defensive coordinator, then when he became the head coach, I remember when I was a kid, the 94 team, the defense they signed Deion Sanders. The Harbaugh teams, the 19 team that Kyle had, the last 2 years now, they've been defense. They've always put a premium on defense, despite being an offensive viewed organization and offensive head coaches.
Think about this. Think about the Giants teams. It's the exact same formula. The good Giants teams. A great coach, Parcells, Coughlin, Dable. A great defensive coordinator, Belichick, Spags.
Yep.
Wink Martindale.
Yep.
A good quarterback, but viewed as not like some super athlete.
But very smart.
Phil Simms, Eli, Daniel Jones. The defense, especially the defensive front, is the hallmark of the team. And not really legendarily historic offensive players. Dave Meggett, Mark Bavaro, Phil McConkey, David Tyree, Mario Manningham, and now it's Isaiah Hodgins, the 6th rounder.
It's crazy.
I mean, some of those guys were obviously Mario Manningham and Bavaro had some talent, but Bavaro's not a top 25 tight end ever. He's probably not a top 40 tight end. So they have a formula. Great coach, defensive coordinator, defensive front, smart quarterback, and like these odd, somewhat forgettable, non-legendary offensive players who make great plays in big games.
And the formula works. Here's the thing with the winners. I need you to email the volume press at thevolume.com. That's the volume press at thevolume.com. Well, Colin, let you get on with your night. Fun talking to you. And should be a fun week.
All right, buddy. Good seeing you.
Take it easy.